So, all right. Hey, you know what? I think I'm going to start with Don. Hey, Don, how are you?
I'm doing fine, and you?
Good. I'm hanging in there. I'm going to spotlight you, my friend. And so what I'm going to do is I will pull up your work and we're going to talk about it. But I am wondering, gosh, Don, you and I could just probably talk for days. And for those of you who have not met Don or don't know, Don was born and raised in Lamar, Colorado, on a working ranch. Grew up without running water and electricity, and I love the story that you tell about how you rode a horse to school and you really didn't like it because a bunch of your friends had bicycles and you wanted a bike.
Wow. That's true.
I wonder, Don, while I'm pulling up your images here, would you talk about your childhood and how you grew up and how that informs your work?
Well, like you were mentioning, I grew up. My parents bought our family farm during the Depression, and before I was born, and then after I was born, a lot of people, I've told this story many times, but my brother, we had a very small house. It had one bedroom. We didn't have heat, electricity, or running water. And my brother and I slept outside on a screened-in porch until we were 15 when we redid our house. So it was a very unusual kind of childhood, I guess, but I always thought it was a wonderful childhood, and it never occurred to me that it was that unusual. But looking back on it, it was pretty unusual. But fortunately, I had two parents that were very loving, a dad that was quite strict but very loving, and so I started doing art when I was about 4, and my parents always supported me doing art, which I think is very unusual, but that you would have farm people that would be that supportive of letting their kid do art. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's pretty unusual. But they were always extremely supportive of me.
Yeah. No, I think it is. And even today, Don, I talk to kids who want to go into art, but their parents are just really trying to dissuade them from it because it's like, that's no kind of life and you can't make money. And, so not only your parents, but you had a school counselor?
Well, also, I went to the little country grade school. I rode the horse there every day, and there were like 15 of us kids at that little grade school. But ironically, I think I was maybe around the 3rd grade that we got a new teacher, and she had formerly been an art teacher. So, and she saw that I loved to draw, and so she was very encouraging to me. The only time she wasn't encouraging, one time we had a math test and I didn't know any of the answers. So I drew chickens all the way around the edge of the paper. He didn't like that.
Of course you did. Of course.
And then I got into high school. Ironically, I didn't take art in high school till I was a senior. But then when I was a senior, I took art, and I was lucky enough to win one. They used to have there was a place in Denver that every year they had an art show for kids. And I entered that, and I ended up winning one of the prizes in that. So that was, and I've always said that for somebody to be an artist, they need to get these little pats on the back that keeps encouraging them. And so I got that. And then I went to junior college. And one day my English teacher said, Don, I want you to come in after school today. I need to talk to you. And I thought, oh my God, what did I do wrong now? So I went in after school and she had all these books laid out on her desk, and she's from different schools. And she said, Don, and this is my English teacher. She said, you've got to go away and study to be an artist. She said, I want you to take these home and show them to your parents, and you've got to do that. So I did. And my parents said, okay. So I ended up going to the University of Denver. And I was very lucky there too. I got another little pat on the back. They had a show at the Denver Art Museum called the Own Your Own that was open to professional and non-professional artists. And I had built a sculpture for my sculpture class, a welded sculpture of buffalo, and I ended up winning the Purchase Award at the Denver Art Museum when I was a junior in college. And
Wow.
to my knowledge, I was the only college student to ever win the Purchase Award.
Wow.
So it's been lucky all the way along, or fortunate that I've got these so-called pats on my back.
Yeah. Please tell Don, this is a comment from Pamela. Please tell Don that was the Scholastic Art Awards, and it is this year at the Denver something. But at the, was that, so I think though, I'm not sure, Pamela, because Scholastic Art Awards is high school, I think. I mean, I could be wrong, but and I often am. But in college, though, this was a college exhibit at the Denver Art Museum. Don, is that what that was?
Yeah, that was at Denver Art Museum that I won the Purchase Award.
Yeah. Hey, Don, I'm gonna do a screen share, and I'm gonna pull up your work.
Okay.
And yeah, and let's talk about it.
Okay.
And
That's
I'm just gonna,
sheet painting.
yeah,
And like I said, I'd never seen those brown sheep with the black faces with a white stripe down it before. I found out they're from Holland,
oh,
but I'd never seen. Of course, I've seen those white sheep all my life, but I'd never seen those other sheep, and I was very intrigued by how beautiful they were. I thought.
yeah. Oh, they look like they have stockings on too. And these are your neighbor. Your neighbor has these sheep.
Yeah, they were, well, she didn't own them, but a guy was renting her property, and
Wow.
he had about 60 sheep out there in the field, and I saw them there, and I stopped and went out and photographed them.
Hey, Don, let's talk about technique just a little bit, because these are acrylic airbrush.
Yes.
And I think you are one of maybe the only artist I know who really creates fine art with airbrush. Would you talk about that? Just kind of
Well,
explain it a little bit. And
I didn't know anything about airbrush, and I had a friend say, have you ever tried an airbrush? And I said, no. And they said, well, there's effects you can get with an airbrush that you can't get any other way. And I said, really? He said, so I went out and bought an El Cheapo airbrush and a compressor and tried it. And sure enough, he was correct. There's a way you can do layers of color with an airbrush that you can't do any other way. But the beauty of it, for me anyway, is because I had always drawn really loose, that when I started doing airbrushing, instead of doing it like Chuck Close and some of the other photorealists did, which was extremely realistic, I liked that very soft touch, that soft look. So my paintings, if you're up close to them, they're quite abstract. Some of them are very abstract and very soft focus. Then as you get back from them, they're very much like, I think, like movie screens. They snap into focus as you get back 15 or 20 feet.
yeah.
Where when you're up close, they're very soft focus, and I like that. I don't like a really hard edge line. I don't use anything to block out the image. That's another way that I get this very soft focus. And I use 2 or 3 different kinds of airbrushes, but my paintings are approximately 60 layers of airbrush.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that because when you walk up to them, you don't see the layers of paint like a oil painting.
No, you don't. They're very soft and smooth. And I start by drawing in pencil first because I used to I love to draw really loose in pencil. So, and I also used to do a lot of watercolor and international watercolor shows. And I always liked pencil as a texture in my watercolors. So
yeah, I wanted to also talk to you about that because when people come to the show and see this painting in particular, if they get up close to it, they will see pencil marks. Now you're using it, you said as a texture, and will you please explain that? Because people do ask.
Well, I always love pencil as a texture. So I've always, once I started doing realistic work, I've always used the pencil. And a lot of times as I'm painting, I'll go in and add more pencil lines in there just as a soft texture.
Yeah, but yeah.
Hard. And I like that when you're up close, you see the pencil line. Then as you move back 3 or 4 feet, the pencil lines go away. You can't see them.
So Don, let me ask you this too. The white, you don't use white paint, is that correct?
I don't use white or black. So the white that you see in my acrylic paintings is I gesso the canvas 7 times so that I get a beautiful, very smooth white canvas. And then as I paint, anywhere I want to leave it white, I just leave the white of the canvas. And of course, then as you're building up the layers of the color, the more color obviously you put on, then the darker the color will be, or the more intense the color is.
Right, right. Wow, I cannot wait to see this. I think you're bringing it in tomorrow for me. So yay. This is always my Christmas. I tell people this is like Christmas for me. I get to see all this work. Okay. So Don, this year we have a number of charcoal drawings from you, which is different.
I've never charcoal before. But I've always done the little Chester drawings for the Coors show. And I thought this year, well, I'm going to do something different. So I decided to buy this. I bought this paper that's sort of a brownish color, which is a very beautiful color. I like it.
Yeah.
And then and the way I do these is the same way I did my gesture drawings. I have my iPad sitting on the pool table and I'm looking at my iPad, and then I draw the images in charcoal. And then I put a little band, cut a piece of cardboard just the size of the image. And I put that on there so that when I spray, it doesn't get on the background. It only gets on the image.
Oh, so you're spraying a fixative on these?
Pardon?
Are you spraying a fixative on the top of, is that what you mean? What are you spraying?
Well, you spray, at charcoal, you have to spray it or it gets all over everything and smears real easy. So once you draw the image in the charcoal, you have to use this charcoal spray or this clear spray that sets the color. Yeah.
Hey, so tell us about, and I've got to jump over to Stephanie here, but tell us a bit about the inspiration for these images. I'm just pulling them up as you talk, but rabbit and longhorn and.
Well, I call what I do now contemporary rural America. It's what you see out in the country if you drive out or go out in the country today. Or on a farm or on a ranch, but it's the images. Sweet. Like here's a Brahma bull.
Yep.
And in fact, there's 2 of the Brahmas, but there's dogs, horses, chickens, all kinds of images of what you see out in the country. I should tell this one little story. I won't tell all of them, but there's been 6 events in my life. One I've already told about my English teacher, but when I was at the University of Denver, my design teacher one day, he says, "Don, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I do these paintings of cowboy and Indians." And he said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I paint cowboy and Indians." He said, "Well, can I come over to your house and look at them?" I said, "Sure." So he came over to my house, and I had him lined up against the floor, and he's picking one up, and then he looks at the next one, and he looks at the next one. Finally, about the 4th or 5th one, he picked it up, he wheeled around and looked right in my eye, and he says, "Don, do you realize it's not 1890? And it was like a bomb went off in my head, and I never painted another cowboy and Indian painting, because I realized that it hit me that art is about your life, not about somebody else's. And the paintings that I had been doing were sort of takeoff of Russell and Remington, which was the first event in my life. When I first saw Charlie Russell painting, I decided I was going to be the next Charlie Russell. So I did that all through high school until my design teacher, DU, turned me the other direction.
Wow. I just put that in the chat. Art is about your life, not someone else's. I love that. Okay, Don, go nowhere. I'm going to move over to Stephanie
Okay.
because Dan's here for the duration.
Yeah, I'm going nowhere.
He
Yeah.
can't leave. So, Stephanie, how are you? Oh, you're on mute.
Unmute. There we
There you
go.
go. Unmute. How
Hi.
are you? Coming
I'm-
to us from Livingston, Montana.
Livingston, Montana, windy Livingston. It's rather
Oh.
warm, but it's very windy.
Oh, is it?
Warm for
Is
the
it?
time of year. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, nice though. That's good.
Mhm.
That's good. Okay, so you have been sculpting and actually, would you you were just down in Arizona. What for like a residency or something? What were you doing down there?
I haven't been in Arizona for a while.
Where were you this summer? Weren't you? Well, I haven't talked to you in a while. Were you?
No. I had a gallery show in Carmel, California,
Oh, okay.
summer, and then I had 2 shows here in Montana.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. It was a
Busy.
busy summer.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Picked up a new gallery here in Bozeman. So
Oh, who are you with in Bozeman?
Old Main.
Okay, great.
And
Good
that's
to know.
new. I've been living in Montana for a decade and haven't had real strong representation in Montana at all. I've kind of gone out everywhere else, and now
Yeah.
it's time to be represented here. So
Nice. Hey, hey, slide over. There's a big buffalo behind you.
I know I have 2 pieces that I'm working on here, but this guy's, sorry about the lighting. I don't know how we can get that a little bit
No,
better.
it's
but
great. Yeah, it's great.
He's pretty good size, about 22 inches at the withers, if you call it withers on a bison. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
he's the bigger version of what we have coming up in the show,
Nice.
which is new for me. The bison, as you know, my work is mainly horses. Sometimes
Yeah.
dogs, have a few, couple of bulls, but
Yeah.
it just felt I wanted a bit of a change. I was just interested in doing some wildlife. Horses have always been and will always be my heart.
Yeah.
Horses and dogs. But
Yeah.
the bison, the bigger bison has just still wanted to come out of me. I wasn't done with the first piece. So yeah.
Well, and can we see the horse behind you? On the other
This
side?
is just getting started. See, he doesn't have any hind legs, but I thought it'd be interesting to see part of the process with a lot of
Yeah.
people ask about the armature that goes inside, what's inside. So I first have to build this metal armature.
Yeah.
And some of it's still exposed.
So what is that metal? You do that yourself?
Yes, well, on this particular piece, do you know the artist Ken Rowe?
No, I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, he's in Arizona. He came up to visit this summer with, Eric Peterson. He's my patina guy. So,
Nice.
and he does patinas for Ken as well. But they came through visiting Montana, and Ken and I worked together. And he, as a thank you, he brought this armature for me. And we worked
Wow.
together. We went out to the barn and used my horse as a model. And it was really, really cool because he taught me something new in the way that he does these. I'm spilling the beans here. I'm sharing his secrets, but I've never done it like this before. So we normally have something solid that comes up here in the middle, into the middle of the piece, and then out from there go the legs and the head and the tail. Here's the tail, which is how I normally work. But what he does that's so cool, and now I'm doing, is he takes this, it's an aluminum wire that's super bendable, and it doesn't have a memory, so it stays where you put it. It doesn't kind of slowly creep back. So that's made for, I don't know if it's used for anything else, but it's for sure used for sculpture. And then he takes over that like a sleeve. I think it's also aluminum, but he cuts them to the right sizes, and then you slide it over the wire, and that keeps this part, because we know the measurement. This is like the bone. We know these measurements on the horse, and we stood there and took all his measurements. His shoulder, we measured that, and then where the point of the shoulder is here. We know those aren't going to change. And so this wire here, now that it has a sleeve over it, it's not going to bend. We essentially created joints.
Nice.
And so, here this leg could bend. I could make it like, if I wanted to make the leg coming up, I could do that. And now I know all my measurements are still solid.
Wow.
They're not going to change. So, it's so cool. It's like a treasure. I love it.
Wow. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, you can always learn, but this is one of the things that, unless you're going out and taking workshops, at some point you kind of know your process and you just go with it and can get stuck in a rut. And this was just a happy happenstance that he came and had the foresight to share this with me. And he's just a wonderful, generous man. So now I learned something new. And one thing that's new for me upcoming is that I'm going to start teaching. So now I have a new, with his permission,
Wow.
his permission to share that to the world, I guess. But I'm going to use that forever for now. It just,
Oh my God.
So easy.
Yeah. Okay. Shout out. Where are you going to be teaching?
Brook Green Gardens next November.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
That's my first place to teach.
Wow, congratulations. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well,
I hope that's been announced. I'm not sure it's completely been announced yet. It's coming up. So I don't know if I spoke too soon, but it'll be out soon anyway. I'll probably I for sure will run a workshop or two here in Montana just to get used to the flow of it. So
very nice. That's awesome. Okay. So Stephanie, let's dive in and talk about your work. So before we opened up the call, we were talking about your whippets. So I'm guessing this one is one of your guys or girls.
Yeah. So I have two, and they're mother and daughter, and I have sculpted them, and they're small size, like this one. So I had to pick another whippet. So I picked Bijou's brother. So that's Benson. He lives in Pasadena. Yeah.
Sweet. And the horse?
And the horse is mine. The horse is Mo. My horse, Smokey D, but I call him Mo.
So when you're coming up with compositions, because I think people don't really, people coming at bronze don't really kind of think about all the stuff that you as a sculptor need to consider, because you really need to kind of paint in a way. You have to consider the negative space when you're creating these compositions. And I'm wondering if you would kind of talk a little bit about that. So we've got the interaction with your dog and horse, but we also have this breathing room around them. There's that allows sort of the gestural things. I'm wondering if you would kind of talk about when you put this thought and composition together.
I do think very much about the negative spaces. Most of my work is a single animal or two animals, because I'm thinking of it usually in profile is what I imagine. And I like, just as the texture I put on the piece, I think of it as a rhythm, as if you would paint small, medium, and large kind of brush strokes. So I'm thinking of those as notes. And I'm also thinking of the balance of the negative space, like here between, there's a space between the tail and the hind leg. There's a very small, and then there's a medium space between the two back legs. And then between the back and the front, you have that nice big space there. And I really pay attention to the balance of that.
Yeah. And then with the dog and the horse. Okay. So I love this thing that's happening with his nose tilted up and the dog and the horse. It's sort of talking about design and balance. There is this sort of beautiful kind of symmetry and almost circular motion happening. You've got the circular aspects of the haunches and the necks and that, but then between the two, there's almost this circular conversation happening.
Well, that's all intentional. I think of it just as a drawing, from profile. And I do, there are points all around the horse that pick up on that circular motion. And also even in my almost brushwork, use of the clay on the horse and the dog. So I'm wanting to move your eye around the whole piece. There's the tension mostly right between them, but I want you to get interested in carrying on through the bodies of the animals all the way around and come back. I hope you keep moving so that it stays interesting to discover new little bits and passages here and there that are interesting.
Okay, I'm going to grab another one, because I pulled yours up differently. So for this talk, but so this piece too. So speaking of these circular kind of things that you have happening here, and I love sculpture when it puts something that is familiar in a stranger, unfamiliar setting, like what you're doing here. So would you talk about how you've perched this horse on this circular slope?
Again, we have that rhythm of movement around and around and around. And I love contrast. With this piece, we've got the contrast of a really machined piece of metal that versus the really loose organic shapes of the horse. The way I originally imagined it, I wanted to have a piece that took up a large presence, but I wasn't necessarily sculpting the whole thing. So that's just where I started with. So I made the base on this round. I imagined something round. So I had to go find something round. And I found around here, there were around Montana, you can see wagon wheel rims, old wagon wheel rims sitting around. Just like junk or like, vintage pieces of yesteryear. So I found as many of those as I could find, and I loved the history of that. They were beat up. I mean, they'd been used, but it's not that easy to find as all the pieces that I needed.
Oh.
So I started to have a wheelwright actually fabricate. There's a guy here, right here in Livingston, that is he builds wagons and builds the wheels just as they did in the way back days. He has got the coolest machine that puts these, so they call that the tire. That's that metal ring is the tire, and it goes right on the outside of the wooden wheel. And he has
Wow.
this huge machine that just clamps it down on. It looks like some steampunk, cool, old, I don't know, it's kind of scary and intense machine, but it just like compresses it on there. So now he fabricates those for me, which, you know, it doesn't have the history that I love. And if I can find any that are the right size, because that's sort of a rare size, it has to be just the right size to balance the piece. Again, like, you know, I think of those shapes and sizes to balance one another. So that has to be about 36 inches to look right with the horse.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. So I'm pulling up the buffalo, and then I'm just gonna ask you a question, then I'm gonna go on mute because they're doing a fire drill over here.
Oh.
Welcome to the stock
Yeah,
show.
I didn't touch nothing.
Surprise. Yeah, he's been here, so I know he didn't pull a lever. So this buffalo, now you're doing it bigger. Is this kind of your first sort of foray into?
Yes, it is. Let's see, that one came out last year. Again, here you see the contrast with the contemporary clean lines with the organic shape of the animal and my work. It's very loose and raw. I like that contrast, and I think it's sort of what makes it contemporary looking, that I'm bringing that sort of industrial edge to it.
You know, I also like the base that it's on. You don't over explain this, right? That kind of gives it this, you know, this very kind of simple, but it's, you know, this sloping base.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of gives it starts a different conversation also. I wonder if you kind of talk about that a little bit.
You know, I'm very intuitive in the way that I work, and the way that this base developed. My metal worker and I, as we were talking about what to do, I think we just came up with a piece of wood because we were considering casting a piece of wood, and it had a slope to it, and it's just like, oh, yes, that's the answer. We both just immediately knew that worked better than just a rectangle. So it, you know, I would love to say that I had some huge intention behind it, but it was just this, there it is, let's go with that. Never just grateful for those happenstances that work.
So, okay, so I'm gonna, this fire drill is perfect timing because I'm gonna cut away to Dan, but I'm wondering, just kind of quickly, would you sort of talk about patinas and how I think it's a real collaborative process with the artists in the foundry, right?
Yes. And I have a fantastic patina artist, he prefers to be called, in Prescott, Arizona. And it took us a while to sort out our rhythm with my work and his ability. And now we have certain patinas that we know that work with my work, and then different colors, like whether I want it more of a brown or a silver or a black or a green. Those are the 4 that we generally use. It took us a while to communicate, and there's some trial and error, but at this point we just have a real rhythm with that, and I know what he's capable of, and we know what works with my work. So on a new piece, at this point, there's not a lot of experimentation anymore, just because we can see it. We both can see it. But definitely before I found him, it was a real struggle, because with patinas, you have to know what's going to happen. You have to kind of foresee the future. And until you actually done it, worked with it's going to look very different on a piece that's super smooth versus mine with a lot of texture. So you just come up with that as you go. And we now have it's like a great partnership. I would really, really, really struggle to continue doing this in this way if it wasn't for Eric, because he's such an integral part of how my work ends up looking.
Well, and I also think, and I'm going to break away to Dan here, but I also think that is something that that I think a lot of people don't quite understand, that sculpture is of all the art forms, maybe printmaking as well, but sculpture for sure is a team sport.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you've got, you're sculpting it, but you've got mold makers, and you've got the people at the foundry that you have to know and trust that they can put everything back together and make sure they get your fingerprints in there and they don't lose the integrity.
Right.
And then the patina person can really make or break things.
It's true. It's very true. Even down to the photography too. I mean, sculpture's not easy. And if you don't have someone who knows how to shoot 3D, it's very different than 2D. It is a team sport. I'm glad you characterized it that way, because I do really appreciate the people that I work with, and I couldn't do it without them. There's so many pieces along the way where it can go quite awry. And it's taken some time over the years to build up that team, and that I can trust. And I do have people I can trust, that I don't have to micromanage and look at every single piece when it comes through, because, the wax person can make a piece, like wreck a piece really fast. And I just trust my wax gal. So she's fantastic. But everywhere along the way, the metal people, and then the patina is the one that's the most obvious color wise. And again, Eric has just he's an artist, so he does a fantastic job that I really he makes my work, he improves my work, so it's a collaboration for sure.
Yeah, good. Okay, go nowhere, my friends. We are going to spotlight Dan Young. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Welcome to the Core Show.
Thank you.
So Dan, sitting right here, this is so great. So, and we have a new piece for the show. I'm also going to kind of pull that up so you can see it as well. But Dan, so Colorado artist, and who lives on is it considered the Western Slope?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so Dan's studio is basically his backyard.
Doesn't look quite like that mountain scene, but close. We'll go with that.
Yeah. So you know what? A few years ago, you had found this open space, and you decided to visit it every single day.
Pretty much.
Would you talk about that? Because I think there's maybe also this misconception that you just throw a bunch of stuff in your backpack and you head out and you're like, oh, that's pretty. But there's a real study of the land and the movement of the land and the light on the land, and right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm fortunate. I live in Western Colorado. I live in Colorado, so I don't have to go very far to find very majestic, obvious scenes, whether it's mountains, rivers, whatever that might be. But over my illustrious career, and I use that lightly, I've sort of evolved. I mean, this piece that's behind us is something I definitely still do, these beautiful, obvious mountain scenes. But when I discovered this little piece of property, it allowed me to slow down. And I have spent a lot of hours in this piece of property. It's like 132 acres. It's got the Colorado River running through it.
Wow.
It's got an irrigation ditch. It's got old growth cottonwoods. It's got the stuff I love to paint. But when I slowed down and started spending a lot more time there, I started seeing things that I would have walked by 5, 10 years ago. So a lot of days I just go over there and sit and sketch, sit and watch. I've done tons of paintings of just a tree or a clump of grass, or maybe something reflecting in the irrigation ditch. So more than anything, it's allowed me to slow down and appreciate the beauty on a simpler scale. So I do a lot more of those type of pieces than I've ever done before.
You know, I'm going to admit something. When I came out and you were all excited about this, and I'm seeing all these amazing paintings, and you took me over there, and I'm like, this is a dirt parking lot, Dan. Like, what are you smoking? But I think that is to me, the eye-opening thing about that. And we tromped around on this, and we crossed the stream, and you showed me where the eagles' nests were, and this turkey that comes up and bugs the bejesus out of it. Yeah, right. And you really get it. And I think that is one of the most amazing things that landscape artists can do for us, is show us the ordinary, the mundane, and put a spotlight on it and say, hey, this is beautiful too.
Oh, absolutely. And why not paint those things you connect with? I mean, this is my backyard. Yes, I connect with the mountain scenes, the classic Colorado scenes, but this is something that is 5 minutes from my back door. So I have a real understanding of what goes on in this little piece of property. So even from the parking lot, I got on a mission, and I have painted 360 degrees from the parking lot.
Wow.
Looking this way, that way, this way, turning about every probably 15 degrees, just out of curiosity to see what I could come up with. I've done it in all the seasons, and it's a fun way to really get an understanding of your neighborhood, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of fun when this right here is your neighborhood, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And there is a little artistic license with this piece, but I've been known to do that.
Yeah, well, that's your job.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, artistic license / lie.
Yeah, the foreground, this place doesn't really exist. The mountain exists and the foreground exists, but I sort of put the foreground in front of the mountain because I like this better.
Yeah.
I do that a lot more now. I combine things. I had a sketch of the mountain peaks and I had a sketch of the foreground, and I put the two pieces together.
Wow.
I did several different studies and tried some different angles and things. And then this is the final piece that came out of probably 4 studies and at least a half a dozen drawings.
So it's interesting you call this a merge of seasons, and it's a merge of concepts.
On top of that, exactly.
Yeah.
I should have called you for the title.
Yeah,
Merge
right.
of
No,
concepts. I
don't
like
call
that.
me for titles. I'm really bad. I'm like, how about Untitled 243?
Right.
Yeah.
Morning light.
Yeah.
Brilliant, Dan. Brilliant.
12,042.
Right.
Yeah. So talk about this, because I think that's a thing too that perhaps goes along with this. Well, you just throw stuff in your backpack and you head out, but you're actually kind of hunting for certain things, but conceptually you are going beyond creating just a straightforward copy of the land. What you're doing is you're really kind of, I mean, maybe I can push this a little bit. You're really sort of talking about your emotions and your inner sensibilities.
Well, absolutely. And I'm making paintings. I have no desire to copy what's in front of me. That's just the launching pad.
Mhm.
For example, in this piece, I pushed the scale of the mountains up to give it more strength. I lowered the horizon line and I blew the scale of the mountain up as far as I thought I could get away with.
Yeah.
And I do that a lot. I tweak the scale of things.
Mhm.
I get in trouble. Sometimes you go too far where it's not believable.
Yeah.
What was that?
Oh, Don, could you mute? I think we're getting feedback from Don. Oh, I just did, yeah. Okay. Yep.
So I
Good.
really tweak things. I'll move, adjust mountains. I'll do whatever it takes to make it a more interesting composition, to play with the design of it, the rhythm of it. And like Stephanie was saying, how I lead you through this, that little irrigation ditch leads you in, you move up through the trees, and then hopefully you move up into a circular motion around this mountain. I mean, that's all thought out. And I usually figure that in a simple abstract drawing is the basics of where I start.
Oh, yeah. You have those piles of like Starbucks napkins with,
Don't advertise. Yeah.
I know where they are in his studio, people. Come with me.
I have thousands of those.
Yeah. Okay, we have to talk about this because this painting is making me think of lipstick. This is a little unusual
See, that
for
would have
you.
been a great title, lipstick, high country lipstick.
High
yeah.
country lipstick.
Right,
It's not too late to
exactly.
change. This is kind of unusual for you because I think you really kind of hold to pretty close tonality, and this one just pops.
I got a little maybe carried away with this. I was having fun with it. Yeah, with the flowers, just see how far I could push it and see if it worked. This was actually painted on location
Oh,
too.
really?
Yeah, I did a little fudging with it. I mean, the flowers, obviously there wasn't this many, and I pushed the color a little bit. These were Indian paint brushes.
Oh,
and they
yeah.
come in a whole range of colors. I kind of pushed them a little bit orange maybe to really get that to pop.
So I was listening to an interview with, and I will have to look up her name, but I think her last name is Kimmer. She's a Native American, but she's a botanist, and she has a book out she has several books out, but Braiding Sweetgrass. And part of her interview was talking about the combo of flower colors.
Oh, interesting.
And the yellow and orange with green and blue, and how they signal certain insects, pollinators, to come to them and push others away in this sort of
Interesting.
But where they will, I know, isn't this fun? Where these two plants
sounds artsy. Yeah.
Yeah, these two plants have to grow together to attract the pollinators.
The correct pollinators.
Yeah. There's another title for your painting.
Yeah. Correct pollinators.
Attracting pollinators. No, but I think nature is so interesting and in that way, and that as a painter, you can light on these and push.
Oh, absolutely. And that knowledge
Yeah.
is so valuable as a painter when you learn something like that. You know, I make stuff up, but it's still based off places and things I've seen.
Yeah. Okay, go your own way. So this particular painting too is this is one that I always love when you do these paintings, because this just makes me feel like I'm in the snow and I'm in the day.
I mean, it's an emotional response. You do a painting like this, if that doesn't grab somebody that's
Yeah.
ever walked through the snow,
Yeah.
you missed the boat. I love painting these things. And how many times I've been out there and I'll make tracks and go back and try to paint them and I'll mess it up. So I'll have to move to another spot because the tracks didn't quite catch the light right. This
I
is
love
actually
it.
over at that piece of property we were talking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a little bit of artistic license with this too, how I adjust the buildings and whatnot.
Sure. You know what, and I think is always fun when you look at snow paintings, there's rarely white in a snow painting.
Exactly. Snow is so influenced by what's around it. It reflects the sky, it reflects the sun, it reflects trees, rocks, all that stuff shows up in the snow.
Yeah.
It's fun to paint.
Yeah. And I love this, how you capture these just scrubby oaks and, and then there again, like Don was talking about adding the pencil in as a texture, and you're able to do it in oil, and then also like take the back end of your brush, right, and carve
Absolutely.
away at
I'll use
stuff,
whatever.
right?
Yeah. Some of the fine lines I can cut in with a palette knife. Sometimes I
Mhm.
scrape the back of the brush. I push the
Like
brush
down
out.
here.
Do whatever I can to get it to feel like what I'm trying to explain.
Wow.
It's about how I explain it to the viewer.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And that evolves. It has over, how I used to do things. I'm always experimenting, painting with credit cards or whatever it is to try to get an edge.
Well, if they don't work anymore, you might as well.
When they're maxed out, you might as well get your money's worth, right?
Okay, a splendid beginning. So morning.
Yes, and this is another from that open space.
Nice.
Yeah.
See, this is amazing
It's-
to me. I swear to God, people, it's a parking lot. It is really not this beautiful. Like, this is you. This is Dan right here, putting Dan into like I love when I look at paintings like this, because I just tell people you just met Dan Young.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I'll steal from Skip Whitcomb with that. He's always said, if you want to get to know me, look at my work.
Yeah.
And I think that is so true. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're painting your backyard, it's going to be you.
Yeah.
And I've seen many sunrises and sunsets over at this property because it's so
Mhm.
close. This is a Colorado River when the sun's just starting to pop up.
Yeah, my hands are starting to get cold just thinking about you painting out there.
I'm paying the price for that. So
I bet you are. Doesn't your paint freeze up?
no, it's pretty,
Really?
yeah, it's got to get really cold before you can't work outside. Unfortunately, I should say the paint now does better than I do.
Yeah.
My fingers, so
Yeah.
many years I've ruined.
Oh my
Frostbite,
God.
they just don't do well.
I bet. Okay, so I always tell artists when we're doing these talks and some artists get really nervous, they're like, I don't know what I'm gonna say. I'm like, oh, don't worry, it'll go by like that. And sure enough, we just have a few minutes left. So Don and Stephanie, would you take the mute off? And I would absolutely love, do you have questions for each other? And I'll give you guys the floor.
Oh,
I have
boy.
a question. I have a question for Stephanie.
Yes.
I'm curious, do you do drawings before you sculpt? I just know sculptors that do both. So I'm just curious what your approach is.
It's kind of a mix for me. I think better in 3D. I mean, I visualize first, and it just depends. Sometimes, usually I would say there's a rough sketch on paper just to work a few things out, but I prefer 3D. So I don't work it out very in detail.
Hey, Don, would you mind unmuting? You're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Just start pushing buttons.
Yeah, just push buttons. That's what I do. I just push buttons. Hey, Don, do you have any questions or add in or thoughts?
Well, not any questions, I don't think. It's just that I've really enjoyed seeing both of their work. I think her sculptures, what I love about her sculpture is the texture on the animals.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a smooth, it's this beautiful texture, which I think is very nice. And on Dan, I like his work. I like work that doesn't look typical, and I don't think his work does look typical. I like the texture of it, and I like the feel of his paintings a lot.
Well, thank you.
You know, what's interesting too, that we didn't, we just, again, I could talk to all of you for days on end, but Don started out as a 3D artist working in ceramics, right?
Well, no, I actually started as a sculptor first.
As a sculptor. Mm-hmm.
And I did that sculpture of the welded buffalo that the museum bought. But then in grad school, I did a tremendous amount of ceramics, and my ceramics teacher, Herb Schumacher, in grad school, desperately wanted me to become a ceramic artist. And he actually took me aside one day and said, Don, you've got to become a ceramic. I said, well, we'll see. So I did everything. I did drawings, painting, ceramics, and finally I settled on painting and drawings.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting because it's like, thinking in 3 dimension, thinking in 2 dimension, they really inform each other. And I think having a grasp of both or all different things, working in multiple mediums, I think Stephanie, you are even looking at working with glass as well, aren't you? Or are you still?
Yes, and my process is the same for the glass. It's just the foundry process is different. So, but I started as an oil painter, and that informed the way I apply the clay to the piece, because I think of brush strokes. So I just put it on as a brush stroke, very much like Dan, like, that loose, intuitive feeling to describe something. It's the way I think about it.
You know what? Let me ask all 3 of you one final question then. And so you've all done all these different mediums. how did you finally light on the one where you are? Did it like call to you? Like this just makes the most sense. How did that happen?
For
Stephanie.
me, I was very excited after having painted for 2 years to take a sculpture workshop. And it just like two things happened. One, I didn't let myself paint any horses at all because I didn't want to be a bad horse painter or a mediocre horse painter. I wanted to be a good artist. And then when I went to sculpture, I had to have a subject. So I allowed myself the horses. And it just like, oh, it felt so native to me. It was like my native language. So it was intuitive to go down that road. Also, there was more room in that space. There aren't as many sculptors, especially female sculptors. There are some fantastic female sculptors, but I thought I could make my name faster in sculpture than there's so many amazing painters. It's just a little bit harder to make your name that way. I mean, that was my perception. Maybe it's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, how about you?
I started as an illustrator, and as an illustrator, I was using mostly gouache and watercolors. And when I first started painting, I thought, I'll be a gouache painter. Nobody's doing it. It'll be unique. And that turned out to be a much bigger challenge than I thought. It just didn't work, especially outside, to do large things. So I started playing around with oil paint, and sort of like Stephanie, it clicked. It's like, oh, this works. It's so much more forgiving. I can scrape, I can redo, and there's texture. That's what was huge for me. With oil paint, I can paint thick, I can paint thin. So you
Nice.
have the luxury of texture, which was huge for the direction I was trying to go.
Wow, nice. And Don, I think you refuse to pick one thing.
I'm sorry,
I
I didn't hear what.
I think you refuse to pick one medium. You do all kinds of stuff, but how did you end up? What was the 2D that called you?
I've worked different ways. Of course, I've been painting for quite a few years, but I painted non-objective for 12 years when I did the religious symbolist paintings. And, I never said, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It just grew, and that's what I just ended up doing.
So okay, but you do oil stick.
Yeah, oil sticks. I love to do oil sticks because they're real loose. I like to, and of course the little gesture drawings that I've always done. And to me, I don't know anybody else that does them the way I do, where I take a dead stick off a tree and dip it in ink and very quickly draw the image, and then take walnut ink and drip it and let it run in there and let it blend. But because I've spent so many years painting really, really loose and free, I enjoy, what I love about doing the gesture drawings or even the charcoal is it's exactly the opposite of doing 60 layers of transparent color.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it gives me just a whole nother way of doing things.
Wow. Okay. We did it. Yay.
Thank you, Rose. You always make it so fun. Your questions are just so insightful, and it makes it fun to talk about what we do.
That's why she gets the big bucks.
That's exactly right. Well, thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Dan, for sticking around. I appreciate it. This made it really fun. Now that I know I can snare artists right here, I might do this more often.
Till I tell everybody.
Yeah, right. Shh, just sneak in. Otherwise, you're going to get on a call.
Yeah, don't call for Rose.
I can't wait to be in person at the show.
I know. So we will be in person this year, and we're working on a system to, vax cards and all that kind of stuff. So please stay tuned for that. We just want to make people safe and and feel comfortable. And we definitely do not, as I always put it, we do not want to kill our patrons. So we're trying to be very cautious about all of this. And so please check the website. More talks are coming up. I've got another one tomorrow evening. They're just boom, 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 back to back. So please come on. Of course, they're going to be recorded, and a little bit of editing done, but they will be online as well. So please tell your friends. And I swear November just completely snuck up on me. I cannot believe next week's Thanksgiving. So anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And artists, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.